Yeah, we've been talking about these shifting justifications depending on which administration official you talk to, and the comment from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Here is how he framed things when speaking to reporters yesterday, a message, by the way, House Speaker Mike Johnson then echoed a short time later.
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
They had to evaluate the threats to the U.S., to our troops, to our installations, to our assets in the region and beyond, and they determined, because of the exquisite intelligence that we had, that if Israel fired upon Iran and took action against Iran to take out the missiles, then they would have immediately retaliated against U.S. personnel and assets. We have troops in harm's way, and we have many Americans in the region, and that was of great concern. If we had waited for all of those eventualities to take place, the consequences of inaction on our part could have been devastating. We don't know at what magnitude, but you can assume, because it is common sense, that if Iran had begun to fire all of their missile arsenal, short and mid-range missiles, at our personnel and our assets and our installations, we would have suffered staggering losses.
I mean, they can't
Willie,
be serious.
I recognize that look in their eyes. That was a look that I would have when I was in college and my professor was asking me my take on the Odyssey. And I said, exquisite writing. And then I would ramble. Those were two of the stupidest answers I've ever heard in my life.
I'm embarrassed.
Marco Rubio just said of Israel that they were the preeminent threat. The preeminent threat was Israel attacking Iran. So we had to attack Iran. Hey, sir, why did you walk into the bar and punch the bartender in the face? Because my friend was about to do that. So I had to punch him because I knew after my friend punched him, he was going to. This makes no sense. It certainly makes no sense geopolitically. It's just stupid. If this is, I can't imagine justifications for the war being stupid. They were doing much better just saying they're the epicenter of terror since 1979. They had to be taken out. But this is getting insane now.
Yeah.
It is, and it also flies in the face of everything we know. That wasn't like Israel was suddenly freelancing and snuck up on the United States who was going to do it. We have our own deep reporting. The New York Times has an extensive piece this morning about Prime Minister Netanyahu lobbying Donald Trump for months and months and months leading up to this day, how they picked the day, completely in concert with Israel. So the United States knew exactly what was happening and what Israel was thinking. But to your larger point, this is not what the president has said. This is not what other officials have said. They said there was an imminent threat to the United States. President Trump said that, meaning they had long-range missiles, he suggested yesterday, that could reach the United States. Most people say that is not true. Most experts, even administration insiders, say that's not true. The other rationale we heard is that they were on the brink, Steve Witkoff said on Saturday, a week away from getting the nuclear material they would need to make a nuclear bomb. Most experts, most insiders say that's also not true.
Willie, by the way, I'm a week away. But Willie, I just want you to know right now, I am a week away from qualifying for the Masters this year. So there you go. No, none of this makes Willie. I mean, this is the most. I think this is the most significant decision we've made to go to war since 2003, when George W. Bush decided to go to war in Iraq, and they can't even get their justification for that war. They can't. I mean, not only
their story straight, they can't get their story straight.
And anybody needs to get them together, Willie, because we're looking stupid in front of the world right now.
Yeah, those were not reassuring performances, shall we say, by the Secretary of State and Speaker of the House. And this is deadly, deadly serious stuff. Obviously, 6 American service members are dead and many more across the region. So the comments we just played for you from Rubio and Johnson contradict earlier reporting from Reuters, citing 2 people familiar with the matter who say Trump administration officials acknowledged in closed-door briefings with congressional staff there was no intelligence suggesting Iran planned to attack United States forces first. Iran's foreign minister responded to Secretary Rubio, writing on social media, he, quote, admitted what we all knew. The U.S. has entered a war of choice on behalf of Israel. There was never any so-called Iranian threat. That's from the foreign minister of Iran, Caddy K. And obviously now, in some ways, Europe has its eye on this war, being drawn in some ways as well. What is the reaction there to this step by the United States and Israel, and to the scramble to find a justification for it?
Well, I guess now we know why it was called the Department of War, not the Department of Defense, because there seems to be, and that's the perception, I've just returned from Munich, Germany last night, there seems to be a perception in Europe that this is an administration that is set on this kind of gunfire operations where it can go in and take out leaders. It worked in Venezuela, as you've been pointing out. It might not work here. But we know from Iraq how important it is to have a clear rationale, to have a clear reason, and to articulate that both to the American people and to the rest of the world. Because if you don't, if the reasons keep changing, it was because Israel was going to attack, it was because we were under imminent threat, then you undermine confidence in other countries around the world. And other countries around the world will then start to say, well, what do we need to do now to secure our own defense? What do we need to do to have our own mechanisms for defense? And you know what they start doing? They start looking at the countries that are not being attacked. Russia is not being attacked. China is not being attacked. North Korea is not being attacked. And you quickly get into a position where people start thinking it's not just that we have to have a common defense. We've got the Europeans at the moment talking about more common defense and even more common nuclear defense. I think that's the danger here, is that if people don't trust America to have clear reasons to act in a way that is rational, with global interests at heart, do we quickly start spiraling into a world that is less safe because people go for maximalist defense positions of their own?
We want to bring in defense editor at The Economist, Shashank Joshi, and David Ignatius has the first question for you.
Have you ever seen an administration launch a preemptive war with this sort of third-party defense reasoning?
No, it's rather striking because, of course, this is not what they said over the weekend when the president first launched this attack. Now they seem to be blaming or attributing this to Israel, which is only inflaming, of course, the divide, especially on the MAGA right, over Israel's influence in Washington policymaking. I think the State Department later tried to pull back a little bit and say, well, we would have gone in anyway. But they're all over the map in terms of this. What are the goals here? Is the goal regime change? The president said so over the weekend. Pete Hegseth said yesterday, no, it's not. Is the goal to go after the nuclear program? Well, the president told us, as recently as last week, that the program had been obliterated. So why are you going after a program that you obliterated? He hasn't really explained that. Ballistic missiles, fine. But a lot of experts say they're still years away from having the kind of missiles that could hit the United States that the president was talking about. When the president gave his explanation, he gave a grab bag of grievances that the United States has had against Iran over 40 years, 50 years, all of them true, but no explanation about why now, why at this time. So Rubio's comments are interesting in terms of timing at the very least.
Yeah, Secretary Rubio also said one central goal is to take out Iran's short-range missile capability. Barbara, that contrasts with what President Trump said hours earlier, that this was really about Iran's long-range threat and that they were trying to develop a weapon that could eventually hit the U.S. If the White House can't even clearly explain what started this war, how can they be clear about how it ends? What does success even look like?
Well, that's the issue in military operations, isn't it? Very easy to get in, very tough to get out of them unless you have a clear end state. Now, as we all know, we've got this, as Peter said, this grab bag of measurements of what they want to do. But how do you know when you've achieved victory? Unless you're going to get Iran to capitulate. And that might be an interesting question to look at. Is the goal here to get the regime to utterly collapse and basically capitulate to Israel and the U.S.? That would be the clearest outcome, but don't count on it. I think it's very unlikely. you're going to see that kind of end state take place.
The question about imminent threat is a big one, Peter. Lawmakers say this administration has offered zero evidence of an imminent threat from Iran. And of course, they didn't go to Congress at this point to get war authorization. And two U.S. officials corroborated that with MS Now related to what we're hearing from lawmakers. So is the U.S. government a credible messenger on this war right now?
Well, it's hard to be credible if you can't keep your story straight, right? If you can't have a consistent message, and so far it hasn't been consistent. I actually think that the reason why the United States decided to go in now, at least one of them, is not that Iran poses an imminent threat, but that in fact it's actually weak because it's back on its heels because of last year's strikes. It was an opportunistic time when the United States and Israel could go in and finish the job as they saw it without much risk to American forces.
Peter Baker and Barbara Starr, as always.